Hi guys. Please close your eyes. Online friends, please type yes that you can hear me if you are with me. Please type yes. Thanks. One of the students is asking what would be a conservative estimate for course completion date. Mid to end of December we should be completing our syllabus. Okay? And that will include a Diwali, significant Diwali holiday period, and otherwise also. Saturday, Sundays are off, and I'm in a slight mood to take more offs this year. Okay? So, that. So friends, we have discussed two major chunks of the syllabus, paper 2 syllabus. One is the caste system, along with associated issues like untouchability, Dalit movement, and family, kinship, the position of women in society, and the women's movements. These are two major areas which we have done, right? And these are two big topics. Of course, I have not been following the sequence of topics mentioned in the syllabus. I have tailor-made it or customized it in a sense. In the syllabus, you have one unit where you have a heading called social movements. And in that you have mentioned Dalit movement, backward class movement, women's movement. But I am discussing as per, along with the respective topics, it makes more sense to me. Theek? So when we discuss untouchability, we also discuss Dalit movement. When we discuss patriarchy, we also discuss women's movement. And that is how we'll be doing it. But rest assured, we'll be completing the whole of the syllabus. Today, the topic that I want to take up, or the unit which I want to begin, is... So your paper 2 syllabus is divided into 3 sections, A, B and C. Section A is introducing Indian society. In that, the second subtopic is impact of colonial rule on Indian society. This is what I am taking up today. Impact of colonial rule on Indian society. Online students are asking me some doubts. I will request you to ask them like maybe in the next lecture or whenever like I'm in a mood to. Because we have an agenda for today which I'll not be able to complete if I take up those doubts. So please pardon me. Impact of colonial rule on Indian society. Under this there are 4 topics mentioned. Social background of Indian nationalism, which I will not be discussing right now. This is the title of a book by a particular guy, scholar. When I discuss his views, I'll discuss this topic there. Okay? That fellow is a Marxist fellow, A.R. Desai. And we have to discuss Indian Marxism. So when we discuss that, we will take up social background of Indian nationalism. The rest 3 topics I'll be discussing today and tomorrow. Namely, modernization of Indian tradition, CNDR, protests and movements during the colonial period, protests and movements during the colonial period, and D is social reforms. Social reforms. I repeat, impact of colonial rule on Indian society, 4 topics. Social background of Indian nationalism, I'll teach later. Today I'll begin with modernization. The topic is modernization of Indian tradition, CNDR, protests and movements during colonial period, and social reforms, which we'll be taking up together. Protests, movements and reforms during the colonial period. ठीक? चलिए. Starting with modernization. Modernization. Do you guys know anything about modernization? Have we studied anywhere about modernization? Where? Which topic? Paper 1, you are right. Weber. Anywhere else? You're right. Weber is right. Anywhere else? Renaissance and Enlightenment, which is the emergence of the discipline of sociology. So, in various places in paper 1, we have already discussed this process of modernization. The birth of the discipline of sociology is owed to the process of modernization of Europe. Yes or no? To understand this process of modernization and the associated changes and challenges, did the discipline of sociology get established? So, it's not a new topic per se. Right? We have been talking about modernization, or we have already talked about modernization at length in paper 1. Agreed? Then tell me, what is modernization? Brother? Good. So one is a change in values, adopting values like modernity, like equality, liberty, fraternity. और बताइए, what else? Modernization is a whole package. One aspect of which is change in values. Brother. New ways, matlab anything new? Urbanization. So not just anything new. Though technically, etymologically, the word modern, the roots is related to the notion of newness. Okay? But yeah, urbanization is an aspect of modernization. But yeah, new technologies, bilkul, of mass production, for instance. Brother. All right. Like religious texts being replaced, or let us say a general trend of overall decline in the social significance of religion. What we call secularization. और बताइए, scientific temperament, or from joint to nuclear family. Bitia, very importantly, new modes of production. And a modern society is characterized by what kind of an economy? Industrial capitalist economy. Bilkul. More emphasis on individualism. Rationalization, what Weber spoke of. Absolutely. All of this is a part of the process of modernization. Right? This process of modernization took place in Europe with the French and Industrial Revolutions, and starting with the Renaissance and then Enlightenment, and culminating in the French and Industrial Revolutions. But is modernization, has it been historically confined to Europe, where the French and Industrial Revolutions occurred? No. began in Europe but spread to various other parts of the world. Yes or no? चाहे नॉर्थ अमेरिका हो, ऑस्ट्रेलिया हो, जापान हो या इंडिया हो. ठीक? Have we been affected by modernization? Of course. So, this is what is modernization. And this process of modernization has been studied at length by various founding fathers of the discipline of sociology. वो सब यही तो पढ़ रहे थे, यही तो एनालाइज कर रहे थे, this process of modernization. Yes or no? In fact, it is the emergence of modern society which led to the emergence of the discipline of sociology. लिखो एक सेंटेंस. Modernization is the social process that led to the rise of modern industrial societies in the West. Due to the combined effect of Renaissance, Enlightenment, and the French and the Industrial Revolutions. In Europe. Full stop. With these developments, मतलब ये सारे रेनेसा फेनेसा. With these developments, the traditional feudal, agrarian, European society got replaced by the modern industrial capitalist society. ठीक? So different founding fathers have analyzed this process of modernization as follows. For instance, and you know it already, I'm just recapping it. We've already studied it. For Comte, what is modernization? Scientific thought, scientific explanations becoming dominant in social life. Theological से metaphysical से positive stage. Positive stage क्या है? Where scientific thought and explanations are dominant in social life, replacing metaphysical या theological explanations. डॉर्खाइम के लिए क्या है? बताओ ना, कोई नई चीज पढ़ा रहा हूं. इमर्जेंस ऑफ अ कॉम्प्लेक्स फॉर्म ऑफ डिविजन ऑफ लेबर. थैंक यू. एंड society based on organic solidarity. Yes or no? Complex division of labor and organic solidarity, डॉर्कहाइम के हिसाब से. मार्क्सिस्ट राइटिंग्स में क्या है? How is modernization understood in writings of Marx, Engels and subsequent Marxists? Change in? So technological advancement and emergence of industrial capitalism. वेबर के लिए क्या है मॉडर्नाइजेशन? रैशनलाइजेशन. Which would also entail disenchantment, bureaucratization. Rationalization is the big daddy, which is not always a very nice way to put it. It's like the overarching process. है ना? ये सब हम पढ़ चुके हैं. अब थोड़े नए बताता हूं. फॉर एंथनी गिडन्स, पढ़ा है क्या इसका अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ मॉडर्नाइजेशन या नहीं? फॉर एंथनी गिडन्स, मॉडर्नाइजेशन is associated with institutions and processes modernity is associated with institutions and modes of behavior that first emerged in post-feudal Europe but later spread to various other parts of the world. Modernity is characterized by इंडस्ट्रियलिज्म. तीन चीजों की बात करता है. पहला इंडस्ट्रियलिज्म, मतलब यूज ऑफ इनएनिमेट सोर्सेज ऑफ पावर एंड मशीनरी टू प्रोड्यूस गुड्स. इंडस्ट्रियलिज्म मीनिंग यूज ऑफ इनएनिमेट सोर्सेज ऑफ पावर एंड मशीनरी टू प्रोड्यूस गुड्स. अर्थात अब चीजें हाथ से बनने के बजाय मशीनों से या स्टीम वगैरह की पावर को हार्नेस करके होगा. ठीक. सेकेंडली, कैपिटलिज्म. कैरेक्टराइज बाय कैपिटलिज्म क्या है? प्रॉफिट मोटिव. Private ownership of capital, propertyless wage labor, propertyless wage labor, and thirdly, the development of the nation state system, development of nation states. जो राइज ऑफ नेशन स्टेट्स था, दैट वाज अकंपनीड बाय डेवलपमेंट ऑफ पॉलिटिकल पार्टीज, मॉडर्न ब्यूरोक्रेसी, and modern political ideologies. मॉडर्न पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजीज. ठीक, क्या है मॉडर्न पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजीज? जैसे लिबरलिज्म हो गई, कम्युनिज्म हो गई, दीज आर मॉडर्न पॉलिटिकल आइडियोलॉजीज, है ना, इस टाइप की. अकॉर्डिंग टू डैनियल लर्नर, modernization refers to the process of social change by which less developed societies acquire the characteristics commonly associated with क्या? More developed societies. Full stop. Thus, modernization involves development of an industrial economy, मतलब एग्रीकल्चर से इंडस्ट्री पे शिफ्ट. हाँ, डेवलपमेंट ऑफ एन इंडस्ट्रियल इकोनॉमी, कॉमा अर्बन लिविंग, रूरल से अर्बन एरियाज शिफ्ट. धन्यवाद भैया. डिक्लाइन in the importance of religion, joint family replaced by nuclear family, traditional political systems like monarchy replaced by democracy type के. एजुकेशन सिस्टम कैसे चेंज होता है? हाँ, एक मास बेस्ड एजुकेशन सिस्टम, mass media, development of mass media, traditional systems of exchange replaced by market mechanism. बिल्कुल. Do you know any traditional system of exchange which has been replaced by market mechanism? जजमानी, क्लोजर होम, या है ना, क्या बाटर वाटर यूरोपियंस की तरह बात करते हो. हमारा जजमानी चला गया, राइट. यूज ऑफ मॉडर्न मीन्स ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन एंड ट्रांसपोर्ट, change in values and thinking, such as a belief in equality, individualism, rationality and scientific temperament, और न जाने क्या क्या. पॉइंट इज दैट मॉडर्नाइजेशन Friends, thus is a very comprehensive set of changes that takes place in a society. पॉलिटिकल मॉडर्नाइजेशन होता है, टेक्नोलॉजिकल होता है, इकोनॉमिक होता है, फैमिली रिलीजन में होता है, यस और नो, वेज ऑफ थॉट में होता है. सो मतलब ईच एंड एवरी एस्पेक्ट ऑफ सोशल लाइफ दस इज affected by the process of modernization, and modernization thus understood results in traditional society being replaced by a modern society, traditional social structures giving way to modern social structures, traditional identities vanishing and being replaced by modern identities. In other words, friends, modern society is understood as the very antithesis, the very opposite of traditional या pre-modern society. Yes or no? ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी में अगर जॉइंट फैमिली थी या एक्सटेंडेड किनशिप की इंपॉर्टेंस थी, मॉडर्न फैमिली में तो न्यूक्लियर फैमिली है. मॉडर्न सोसाइटी में तो ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी में अगर एग्रेरियन इकोनॉमी थी, में मॉडर्न में इंडस्ट्रियल इकोनॉमी है. रूरल लिविंग थी, यहां अर्बन लिविंग है. एलिटिस्ट एजुकेशन सिस्टम था तो मास बेस्ड एजुकेशन है. रिलीजन की इंपॉर्टेंस बहुत थी तो रिलीजन डिक्लाइन हो चुका है मेजरली. यस और नो? पहले अगर हायरार्की वगैरह टाइप में मानते थे या कलेक्टिविज्म में मानते थे, अब इक्वालिटी में मानते हैं, इंडिविजुअलिज्म में मानते हैं. क्लियर? सो मॉडर्नाइजेशन इज सीन एज द डिमाइस ऑफ ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी, ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रक्चर्स एंड आइडेंटिटीज बीइंग entirely replaced by modern structures and identities. सिंपल एक लाइन में लिख लो अगर ज्यादा परेशान हो रहे हो, कि the modern society is thus regarded as the very opposite of traditional society. तो ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी की एशेज में से राइज करती है एज इट वर मॉडर्न सोसाइटी. ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी का एफआईडेयर से खून करके जन्म लेती है मॉडर्न सोसाइटी. A little melodramatic, quite. But that is it is the very contrast, the very opposite of traditional society. ठीक? तो मॉडर्नाइजेशन का मतलब ही क्या है? ट्रेडिशनल सोसाइटी का खत्म हो जाना and it being replaced by modern society. ठीक? Now friends, tell me, modernization, has it happened only in Europe? Where else has it happened? So it is a near universal process. It seems that modernization is a near universal process. But what we have just discussed, so has it happened in India? Modernization, has it happened in India? Clearly it has. And as we speak, we are still undergoing modernization. So, the understanding of modernization that we have just developed, resulting in the death of traditional structures and identities and them being replaced by modern ones, has that taken place in Indian society? Yes or no? Clearly, no. Clearly, not. So, जो syllabus का topic है, that is modernization of Indian tradition. Modernization of Indian tradition. This, friends, is the title of a book by Yogendra Singh. I'll dictate also, but first I'll explain. So the title itself should indicate, has modernization resulted in India in the death of traditional structures and identities? The title itself will indicate to us that instead क्या हुआ है, ट्रेडिशन ही मॉडर्नाइज हो गया है. That in Indian society, traditional structures have not been replaced by modern structures. Traditional identities have not been replaced by modern identities. Instead, traditional structures have modernized. A very readily, I'll dictate for sure, a very readily identifiable or appreciable example would be the caste system. So what has happened to the caste system? We have undergone modernization for more than 200 years now. Has the caste system vanished and been replaced by the class system? Clearly not. Clearly not. कास्ट है ना, और खूब है, हमने गहराई में पढ़ा है. So can we then say Indian society, या say caste in particular, has remained unaffected by modernization? Will that be a correct statement to make? That Indian society or say the caste system has not been affected at all by modernization? क्या ये सही कह रहा हूं या नहीं? क्योंकि पहले भी था, अब भी है. सही कह रहा हूं या नहीं? नहीं कह रहा. वेरी गुड. क्यों? और लेट अस से कि इट हैज चेंज्ड. Caste of today, the caste system which exists today is not the same what existed 300 or 400 years back. So clearly, the caste system or Indian society in general has been affected by modernization. But our experience of modernization is not the same as that of Europe. देखो, जो अभी तक हमने definitions वगैरह लिखी, where we understood modernization as resulting in the demise of traditional structures and identities replaced by modern ones. ये एक European perspective से. In Europe, this actually happened. For example, they had an estate system in France that was replaced by the class system. Theological explanations of phenomena were replaced by scientific explanations. Traditional affective social action was replaced increasingly by rational social action. ठीक है? Overwhelming majority of the population resides in urban areas in Europe. So there was a clear shift in population, economy, whatever, values, everything. है ना? तो उन्होंने, that is how the understanding they developed of modernization. कि modernity is the very opposite of tradition. Modern society means, stands for exactly the opposite of traditional society. But our experience of modernization has been different. In case of Indian society, modernization has not led to the demise of traditional structures or identities. हमने अभी कास्ट की बात की. इसी तरह joint family. Has the joint family system in India been affected by modernization? फर्क पड़ा है? Yes, पड़ा है. Has it given way or been replaced, lock, stock and barrel, by nuclear family? No. तो क्या हुआ है? कैसे मॉडिफाई हो गई? यू राइट. फंक्शनल जॉइंटनेस हो गई. साथ रह नहीं पा रहे क्योंकि अब सबकी महत्वाकांक्षाएं बढ़ गई हैं. मटीरियलिज्म, इंडिविजुअलिज्म आ गया है. सो पीपल नाउ will venture out for better jobs, better education. They'll establish nuclear households, but functional jointness remains. Arthat, the joint family sentiment prevails even now. Yes or no? साथ रह नहीं सकते तो क्या हुआ? यहीं बैठे बैठे व्हाट्सएप पे पैसे भेज के मां बाप की सेवा करेंगे. करोगे या नहीं? करोगे. ठीक. इसी तरह, have we seen the kind of decline of religiosity in our society with the kinds West has? Is religion important in India? Mighty important. Pradhan Mantri ji is going to inaugurate Ram Mandir. It's very in your face. It's very public. It's an integral part of our lives. Yes or no? तो चाहे रिलीजन हो, चाहे एथनिसिटी हो, चाहे फैमिली एंड किनशिप की इंपॉर्टेंस हो, चाहे कास्ट सिस्टम हो, ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रक्चर्स एंड आइडेंटिटीज हैव शोन ग्रेट अडेप्टेबिलिटी. They have been affected, but they have changed and withstood the forces of modernization. Unlike in the West, where they literally collapsed and were replaced by modern identities and structures. Clear? To likho. Acha, one thing before I dictate that in some, it's a very difficult to read book. Very unfriendly, reader unfriendly kind of a text. The only merit it has is it is patli. It's a thin book and small in size, but extremely jargon laden. Why I am saying this? Because in some UPSC preparation circles, I hear about this book being suggested as a good read. I strongly personally advise against it. ठीक है? तो कठिन किताब है, टाइम वेस्ट होगा, बहुत लाभ नहीं होगा. हाँ? तो आई विल बी ट्राइंग टू प्रेजेंट टू यू द क्रक्स ऑफ दिस बुक इन simple form, the way I have just done. This is one of the key takeaways of this book, that in Indian society, unlike in the West, modernization has not resulted in the modern structures replacing lock, stock and barrel traditional structures and identities. ठीक? लिखिए. योगेंद्र सिंह, in his book Modernization of Indian Tradition, suggests that the process of modernization in India has not led to the breakdown of tradition. Full stop. Traditional social structures in India have selectively adapted to modernity instead of being replaced by it. Full stop. Modernization in Indian society is being carried out with adaptive changes in traditional structures. Rather than their structural breakdown. Full stop. Thus, traditional social structures have responded positively to the forces of modernization. ठीक? This is one key takeaway from his writings. Another, and you can mention examples कि caste है वो ऐसे change हो गई. कौन कहता है कि caste has adapted, which we have studied at length? Andre Bete. कि it has now taken up an increasingly political role. Yes or no? Even Louis Dumont, who is otherwise a very conservative kind of a scholar, he also acknowledges substantialization of caste. कि पहले interdependence होती थी in the caste system earlier, now that has been replaced by competition between castes. Yes or no? इसी तरह कौन कहता है कि joint family में functional jointness दिखती है? IP this I, है ना? बिल्कुल. इस तरह से we can give examples. Second point, again I'll dictate after explaining. Simple thing है. Basically, when Yogendra Singh was writing, okay, this was in 1970 or about. By that time, there was already a lot of literature in sociology and anthropology studying the process of social change in India. So he was not the first guy to be studying social change. There was already a lot of studies of the process of change in India. For example, Sanskritization, M.N. Srinivas ka concept. Westernization, again which had been extensively written about by M.N. Srinivas. Aur bhi kai the, which I'll mention as we go along. No, so what Yogendra Singh felt that all these are important contributions, no doubt. Okay, Sanskritization is a very handy tool to understand changes taking place in the caste system or that have taken place. इसी तरह कुछ concepts थे like little tradition. We have not studied them right now. We will study later. I'm just making a mention. And great tradition. इस नाम के कोई concepts थे. कोई concepts थे universalization, parochialization. This is not the proper place to explain them, but we will study them later. But all of them basically try to analyze the way Sanskritization does, with which you are intimately aware. They help us to understand the process of changes, the process of social change taking place in our society. So, Singh Sahab क्या कहते हैं? These are important contributions, no doubt. The problem is none of them, they have a kind of a piecemeal approach. These scholars who are trying to analyze social change, they are only looking at one or certain dimension. They are not looking at the process holistically. तो वो काम मैं करूंगा. मैं कौन? योगेंद्र सिंह. मैं आपको एक बढ़िया comprehensive integrated framework दूंगा. And that is what he seeks to do through his theory of modernization of Indian tradition. He tries to basically integrate or weave together these various concepts into a single theoretical framework. ठीक है? जैसे ये चुन्नू बात करते हैं या एक पर्टिकुलर डायमेंशन की बात करते हैं. Like you know Sanskritization very well. But it only captures one aspect of social change in India. ठीक? सो ये है दूसरा हमारा मेन क्रक्स की एक इंटीग्रेटेड थ्योरेटिकल फ्रेमवर्क ही इज ट्राइंग टू डेवलप. लिखो. योगेंद्र सिंह develops an integrated approach to study social change in India. अंडरलाइन इंटीग्रेटेड अप्रोच. हाँ, जो भी किसी भी पैरा में जो डिक्टेट कर रहा हूं, जो की आइडिया है ना वो अंडरलाइन कर लो. पिछले वाले में द की आइडिया वाज दैट ट्रेडिशन और ट्रेडिशनल स्ट्रक्चर्स हैव नॉट ब्रोकन डाउन बट हैव अडेप्टेड सिलेक्टिवली टू द प्रोसेस ऑफ और टू द फोर्सेस ऑफ मॉडर्नाइजेशन. दैट वाज द की आइडिया, है ना, ताकि याद करने में भी ऐसा नहीं रहे कि हाँ हमें ये 4 चीजें लिखनी है व्हाइल राइटिंग अबाउट मॉडर्नाइजेशन. क्या लिखा है बेटी? To study social change in India, full stop. Singh considers that while other scholars have made important contributions to analyzing social change in India, and have developed concepts that are useful comma none of them provide a comprehensive framework to study social change in India. Full stop. Singh attempts to integrate their contributions या concepts into a single theoretical framework dash he uses M.N. Srinivas's concepts of Sanskritization and Westernization, Milton Singer's concepts of little tradition and great tradition, McKim Marriott's concepts of universalization and parochialization, and many others. To understand changes taking place in culture and social structure in India. ठीक? Don't worry for now what these terms mean. I'll not leave them unattended. We will, but later. ठीक? Another thing that Singh says, so इस पैरा का क्रक्स क्या है कि इसने एक इंटीग्रेटेड अप्रोच डेवलप की. हाँ? तीसरी बात क्या है कि what he says, and I'll dictate also later after explaining, that modernization, of course, was not confined to Europe. It may have first taken place in Europe, but then it took place in various other societies, including India. Now, it's logically erroneous, or it's a logical fallacy to assume that it will produce the same result in all societies. Modernization theorists which we discussed earlier, chahe Comte ho ya Weber ho, all of them assume what? That we will all end up like European societies when we become modern. Yes or no? वो बोलते ही डिफाइन ही उसको ऐसे करते हैं कि रैशनल थिंकिंग होगी, साइंटिफिक टेम्परामेंट एंड ब्ला ब्ला. Which is logically erroneous. Why it's erroneous? Simply because in any process of change, ठीक है, चाहे फिजिकल मैटर का हो, केमिकल कॉम्पोजिशन हो, कुछ भी किसी भी लेवल पे हो, if two things are subjected to the same process, will it result in the same this thing? No. What the end result is dependent on what the initial conditions are. Yes or no? शुरू में चीज का कंडीशंस कैसी हैं, फिर वो कोई प्रोसेस अंडरटेक करेगी, तो एंड रिजल्ट जो होगा दैट विल डिपेंड ऑन हाउ द सोसाइटी और हाउ दैट थिंग वाज इनिशियली. आप कागज को आग लगाओ या पानी के नीचे आग लगाओ, क्या सेम एंड रिजल्ट होगा? नहीं. क्यों? क्योंकि एट द बिगिनिंग कागज इज फंडामेंटली डिफरेंट फ्रॉम पानी, वाटर. So the impact of that process, in this example, crude example, application of heat, your fire, it will have a different ending. Yes or no? So it is fallacious to assume that modernization will produce the same effect in all societies. Simply, what will be the outcome of the process of modernization is dependent on how the society was before modernization. Indian society, coming to Indian society, it had been undergoing a lot of changes even before modernization began. Modernization broadly began during the colonial period. That is when you had this industrial technology or the works, printing press, railways, politico-administrative या bureaucracy, ये सारी चीजें मॉडर्न चीजें आई, मॉडर्न एजुकेशन आई. पर क्या उससे पहले इन प्री मॉडर्न या प्री कॉलोनियल इंडिया वॉज द सोसाइटी स्टैटिक? क्लियरली नॉट. इट वॉज अंडरगोइंग अ लॉट ऑफ चेंजेस. दोज चेंजेस प्रोड्यूस्ड अ सर्टेन काइंड ऑफ सोसाइटी. देन मॉडर्नाइजेशन की फोर्सेस आई, उस सोसाइटी पे वर्क करी, and accordingly a certain outcome is to be expected. Don't expect simply India to become like Europe. ठीक? So before modernization, how Indian society was changing, there were various forces that were resulting in changes. He classifies them into two kinds. There were orthogenetic sources of social change and logically orthogenetic and tukka maro quickly. No, very wrong. Mati maro. Heterogenetic sources of social change. Orthogenetic sources क्या होते हैं? Those which are from within. Endogenous या orthogenetic, those from within the society. So there were several developments within Indian society, from within the Indian society, which were leading to changes. And then there were developments from without, from the outside, called heterogeneous or heterogenetic, sources of, exogenous बोलेंगे, social change. Orthogenetic sources क्या हुए? For example, the rise of Buddhism, Jainism, Sikhism, Bhakti movement, changes in the size of the population, migration, Sanskritization, ये सब क्या है? Orthogenetic या changes from within. इससे हजारों साल तक इंडियन सोसाइटी बदलती रही बिफोर मॉडर्नाइजेशन. हेट्रोजेनेटिक सोर्सेस क्या है? टू इंपॉर्टेंट हेट्रोजेनेटिक सोर्सेस ऑफ सोशल चेंज योगेंद्र सिंह आइडेंटिफाइज. वन इज Islam. So when Islam came to India, that was one major development or a new kind of an encounter that we had. And the second was, the British. These are sources of social change which came from the outside. ठीक? लिखो. Next para. Singh argues that the nature of modernization there's a question, let me take that up, otherwise it will keep bothering me, that Dalit movement जितना क्लास में किया करवाया उतना काफी है क्या? The answer is yes. But don't throw up such questions like, disturbs the flow. चलो, कहाँ हैं हम? The nature of modernization in a society is also greatly affected by the initial conditions. Full stop. Several orthogenetic and heterogenetic sources of social change affected Indian society and culture. Full stop. Orthogenetic sources were, one second, those that led to those that led to the changes from within Indian society. From within Indian society. Full stop. The rise of Buddhism, Jainism, the Bhakti movement, criticized the then prevailing social institutions and values. Full stop. Demographic changes, जैसे कि पॉपुलेशन इंक्रीज या डिक्रीज, कॉमा माइग्रेशन, and Sanskritization were other important orthogenetic sources of change. Next para. Heterogenetic sources of social change include the coming of Islam and colonial rulers to India. Full stop. Stop writing and answer me. Then I'll dictate also. When Islam came to India, did it have a modernizing influence on Indian society and culture? Singh opines it did not. Why? Because Islam itself was a traditional system. Hinduism was the dominant system over here, or the dominant way of life. So it was basically one traditional system meeting another traditional system, right? So it could not have the same kind of a modernizing effect which the colonial encounter would. Likho. Full stop डाल के. The advent of Islam in India marked an encounter between two traditional systems. Full stop. However, several important modernizing influences were introduced I repeat, several modernizing influences were introduced in Indian society by the Western civilization during the colonial period. Full stop. Their impact is evident Their impact is evident in the microstructures. In the microstructures of jati, family, and the village community. As well as the macro structures of pan-India bureaucracy, political parties, the new legal and judicial systems, modern industry, and markets. अब ऐसे क्या पता क्या क्या बोल गया मैं. मॉडर्न इंडस्ट्री एंड मार्केट्स. ठीक है. Thus, while India may have been exposed to the forces of modernization, during the colonial period, I repeat, thus, while India may have been exposed to the forces of modernization during the colonial period, comma, several forces other than and before the colonial period have sufficiently affected our experience of modernization. ठीक. Clear? So the crux of this para is what? That, or this whatever para or two, that basically modernization will not have the same impact on all societies. How the society was when modernization began will also affect how it ends up after modernization. Indian society was not static before the forces of modernization were unleashed during the colonial period. It was already undergoing several changes due to various orthogenetic and heterogenetic factors. ठीक. ये बताओ, अगर इस्लाम जैसे ट्रेडिशनल था, does it mean it had no impact? Of course not. It did lead to social changes. सारे social changes modernizing होने जरूरी नहीं है. It did lead to significant changes. क्या changes हुए थे? Some of you may know intuitively, other else we'll discuss at some length कि how Islam has affected Indian society. But जाहिर है, the lot of rulers were Muslim. सबसे बड़ा visible impact of the advent of Islam क्या है? Architecture. उससे भी बड़ा, उससे भी ज्यादा. Yes? Gunpowder. Culture. 20 करोड़ मुसलमान. Yes or no? The very fact that we have this very large Muslim population, they are the largest religious minority, है ना? और भी बहुत सारे हैं, आर्किटेक्चर में है, टेक्नोलॉजी में है, दसों चीजें हैं. हाँ, बट क्लियरली बहुत सारे चेंजेस इस्लाम के एडवेंट से भी हुए हैं. तो इस पैरा का पॉइंट यही था कि उससे पहले भी चेंजेस होते रहे हैं. हाँ, और कैसे पहले सोसाइटी थी उससे अफेक्ट करेगा सोसाइटी मॉडर्नाइजेशन के बाद में क्या होगी. थर्डली फ्रेंड्स, थर्डली या फोर्थली वट एवर, Yogendra Singh says what? I'll again first explain, then dictate. What he says, usually how we understand modernization in terms of thought processes. What is the thought process of a modern person? Yeah, thought processes, value systems associated with modernity. Rational होता है, और बोलो. Scientific होता है, और बोलो. Progressive होता है. Universalistic होता है, rather than particularistic. Yes or no? So I will say, as a bureaucrat, I will not favor my brother. I will treat him at par with other applicants. Yes or no? Equality में विश्वास रखता है. Individualism में विश्वास. This is what we typically associate with the process of modernization. That is how people's thinking, mindsets, value systems change. Has that happened in India? आप हो modern, आप अपना बताओ ना. Have you started thinking on these lines, modern lines? The answer is a qualified yes. So thought patterns have changed in India also. But have they completely replaced the traditional modes of thought? The answer is no. इंडिया में भी वो रैशनल थिंकिंग हो रही है, इक्वालिटी में बिलीफ हो रहा है. हाउ मेनी ऑफ अस बिलीव इन इक्वालिटी बेटर देन स्ट्रक्चर्ड इनइक्वालिटी? दैट्स ऑल ऑफ अस. एंड अदर्स आर जस्ट ओनली टू लेजी टू रेज देयर हैंड्स. ठीक है ना? तो हमने वो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल प्रिंसिपल ऑफ इक्वालिटी इंबाइब कर लिया है. सो हमारी भी थिंकिंग तो अफेक्ट हुई है. बट ट्रेडिशनल हैव नॉट बीन एंटायरली गिवन अप. Why? I'll tell you as we write. लिखो. योगेंद्र सिंह considers that modernization generally implies the adoption of a rational attitude, and evaluating things. Stuff वगैरह मत लिखा करो, कैजुअल भाषा लगती है. Evaluating things from a universalistic standpoint. Full stop. Modernization generally implies that values of hierarchy and holism are replaced by values of equality and individualism. Very good. I repeat, values of hierarchy and holism are replaced by values of equality and individualism. Full stop. However, in developing societies like India, the urge for modernity is accompanied by a search for identity. The urge for modernity is accompanied by a search for identity. Full stop. See, as we become more and more modern, we also tend to go out on this journey of self-exploration, of trying to identify our roots, of trying to figure out who we really are as an individual or as a people. And where do we find? How do we satisfy this seeking one's identity? मेरी आइडेंटिटी कैसे डिफाइन होती है? By caste, by religion, ethnicity, kinship group. समझ रहे हैं आप? So our identity is rooted in traditional structures. So point is कि जितना हम मॉडर्न होते जाते हैं in developing societies like ours, उतना ही we are trying to cling to our traditional identities. Yes or no? तो हम ये गगनयान और ऑल दोज यान्स भी भेजेंगे और हम राम मंदिर भी बनाएंगे, हम रफेल भी खरीदेंगे, पर उस पे स्वास्तिक भी बनाएंगे. यस और नो? मैं कौन हूं? बनिया. दिस वॉज नॉट ऑलवेज सो स्ट्रांग, दिस आइडेंटिफिकेशन विद बनियाहुड. जैसे जैसे हम मॉडर्न होते जा रहे हैं, वी आर बिकमिंग मोर अटैच्ड टू आवर रिलीजियस, एथनिक, वट एवर वेरियस आइडेंटिटीज. क्लियर? तो दोनों चीजें साथ हो रही हैं इंडिया में, इसीलिए एक कोलैप्स नहीं हो रही विद मॉडर्नाइजेशन. ठीक, लिखो. लास्ट सेंटेंस क्या है बेटी? Full stop. Thus, traditional identities and values may be retained, or even strengthened even as modern ones are adopted. Modern ones are adopted. Are we adopting modern identities? Like say class identity, professional identity, do they matter in amongst modern Indians? Say amongst us. तो मेरी जो प्रोफेशनल आइडेंटिटी है कि मैं टीचर हूं या मैं इंजीनियर हूं, मैं सीए हूं, मैं सिविल सर्वेंट हूं, वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. दैट इज वाई यू गाइज आर पुटिंग इन द प्राइम ऑफ योर यूथ, चेजिंग दिस, डेयर आई से, एल्यूसिव काइंड ऑफ अ गोल. Yes or no? Modern identities are important, but also the traditional ones. तो फाइनली हम क्या हैं? हम मॉडर्न हैं या ट्रेडिशनल हैं? वेरी गुड, हम दोनों हैं. कैसा लगा लड़का? बढ़िया. शादी करा दें आपकी? बढ़िया लगने से तो काम ना चलेगा ना. बताइए, लिखो फिर क्रिटिसिजम्स. यू हैव आउटसोर्स्ड योर थिंकिंग टू मी. ये क्या ही सोचवाओगे? Couple of criticisms, friends. Firstly, this guy, the way he projects it, okay, he shows as if there is a very harmonious relationship between tradition and modernity. Yes or no? कि भैया फोर्सेस ऑफ मॉडर्नाइजेशन आई तो विली नीली वो अडेप्ट कर गई. कास्ट पहले ऐसी थी, अब ऐसी हो गई. न्यू जॉइंट फैमिली पहले ऐसी थी, अब ऐसी हो गई. कोई दिक्कत की बात है ही नहीं इनकी नजरों में. Yes or no? critics point out that when there is an encounter between tradition and modernity, or when traditional structures are impacted by the forces of modernization, there is not only adaptation. Oftentimes there is also conflict, contradictions, clashes between tradition and modernity. सब कुछ राजी खुशी नहीं हो जाता योगेंद्र साहब. I repeat, critics argue that Singh overemphasizes on the adaptability of traditional structures to the forces of modernization. I repeat, critics argue that Singh overemphasizes on the adaptability of traditional structures to the forces of modernization. Full stop. Critics point out that an encounter between tradition and modernity in Indian society, critics point out that an encounter between tradition and modernity in Indian society also generates contradictions, conflicts, and clashes. ठीक? For example, now we have imbibed this modern notion of gender equality, enshrined it in our constitutional and legal framework also. Traditionally, the society has been patriarchal, male dominated. So does a male dominated society easily accept this notion of gender equality? When imbued with this modern ideology of gender equality, young women, or thanks to the enabling conditions created by this modern system, when young women venture out in the public domain, what do we see? Increasing crimes against women. Kind of a patriarchal backlash. नहीं सुहाती patriarchy को, traditional patriarchy को, this notion of gender equality. Yes or no? इसी तरह हमने बोला कि इक्वालिटी अक्रॉस कास्ट्स, बट कास्ट सिस्टम का जो प्रिंसिपल है वो है हायरार्की. अब ये इक्वालिटी की आइडियोलॉजी इंबाइब करके या कंडीशंस की वजह से जो, अब when Dalit grooms ride horses, what do we see? Atrocities or a backlash from the higher castes. Yes or no? कि दलित बस्तियां जला दी, या दलित ग्रूम्स को वो कर दिया, या दलित विमेन को रेप कर दिया, व्हाटएवर. सो जो दोनों है ना, बहुत नेसेसरली ये जो जितना एम्फसाइज हार्मनी और अडेप्टेबिलिटी पे करते हैं वो हमेशा नहीं देखने को मिलता है समाज में. सेकेंडली, अनदर क्रिटिसिज्म ऑफ, क्या नाम है तुम्हारा, योगेंद्र सिंह, इन्होंने सिर्फ थ्योरी दी. ठीक है, ही डिड नॉट कैरी आउट एनी सॉर्ट ऑफ फील्ड वर्क, और ही वॉज नॉट कंसर्न्ड अबाउट एम्पेरिकल एविडेंस. He has only been concerned with theory building. Yoginder Singh has been only concerned with theory building. And not concerned with furnishing empirical evidence. कोई आपको ऐसा स्कॉलर पेपर 1 का याद है? पार्सन्स. नहीं, नॉट दौरखाइम. आर्मचेयर सोशियोलॉजिस्ट थे, बट उन्हें किसी का तो डेटा वेटा यूज किया था. Parsons, like this guy, did not bother with. Huh? Even for religion, Durkheim relied upon works of other people who had visited the Arunta people. Huh? Care. And suicide, of course, he very extensively used empirical basis for his theory of suicide. You know? Okay, that's a digression. Thirdly, M.N. Srinivas. Srinivas क्या criticize करते हैं? That this term modernization is value loaded. Term modernization is value loaded. So Srinivas कहते हैं a more appropriate term will be westernization. For Srinivas, a more appropriate term will be westernization, which is value neutral. Sorry. Why he says that, friends? See, in modernization theory, or say, a modern society is considered as somewhat better or more evolved than a pre-modern society. A modern society is, from this, Eurocentric bias, assumed to be superior or a more progressive society than a pre-modern society. तो जो modern है वो बेहतर है. Yes or no? So when we are saying कि भैया, when we are say analyzing in India, please, we are saying that in India, what do you call? ये अभी मत लाइएगा. Joint family is being replaced by nuclear family. या rural life is being replaced by urban living. या agrarian. We as social scientists should not comment whether it is a good or a bad process. That will be a value judgment. Yes or no? Westernization in that sense is a neutral term. It simply indicates the impact of Western culture on Indian society. We are not commenting whether it is a desirable or an undesirable process. The way the term modernization indicates. ठीक? एक डेफिनेशन लिख लो. वेस्टर्नाइजेशन की डेफिनेशन दे रहा हूं. इट्स नॉट लाइक नेसेसरली अ पार्ट ऑफ द क्रिटिसिज्म, जस्ट सिंस वी आर डिस्कसिंग इट, बॉक्स में लिख लो या व्हाटएवर. वेस्टर्नाइजेशन अकॉर्डिंग टू M.N. Srinivas refers to the changes brought about in Indian society excuse me, changes brought about in Indian society and culture as a result of over 150 years 150 years of British rule. Full stop. It includes पानी पता नहीं कब आएगा. It includes changes in, ठंडा होगा मैं गर्म लेता हूँ, thanks. It includes changes in institutions, technology, ideology, and values. Full stop. For instance, the introduction of railways, modern means of communication, such as printing press या telegraph, इस टाइप के modern means of communication. Establishment, धन्यवाद, of modern educational institutions, passing of progressive legislation, which progressive legislations were passed? Colonial period? Sati abolition, widow remarriage act, सब खूब सारे, we'll discuss अभी. हाँ. Rise of nationalism, rise of modern bureaucracy, ideas of liberty and equality, और न जाने क्या क्या. ठीक. So which is a better term? Modernization या westernization? Westernization. योगेंद्र सिंह पलटवार करता है, वो कहता है westernization is not an appropriate term, modernization is better. Why, according to him, modernization is a better term? Because westernization, it indicates that we are becoming like Western society, which we are not. Which we are not. Secondly, our experience of modernization has not been solely under Western influence. We have also been modernized by Soviet influence. Yes or no? The Eastern Bloc. हमने planned economy कहां से सीखा? Centralized economy कहां से सीखा? Socialist ideology कहां से सीखा? Communist influence कहां से आया? ये सब they were majorly influential after independence, or even during the colonial period to some extent. कहां से आया ये सब? सोवियत से आया, है ना? तो ये है. चलो, with that we are done with this topic and we've earned ourselves a break. Please settle down. Friends, let us proceed. Guys. Chaliye, moving on to the next topic, which is protests, movements, and social reforms. Protests, movements, and social reforms during the colonial period. Protests, movements, and reforms during the colonial period. So during the colonial period, friends, Indian society witnessed a very large number of when it comes to writing, I'll tell you, okay? But first just bear with me. Indian society witnessed a large number of protests and agitations, socio-religious reform movements, and various other sorts of movements during the colonial period. Some of them we have touched upon. Please don't talk. Some of them we have touched upon. For example, we have discussed, Dhanyavad Bhaiya, we have talked about various women's movements during the colonial period, if you recollect. We've discussed some of the Dalit movements during the colonial period, if you recollect. Chahe Ambedkar's efforts, Gandhi's efforts, hai na? So various sections of the society, whether Dalits, whether women, whether the backward classes today whom we call OBCs broadly, whether tribals, ya peasants, ya working class, were engaging in numerous uprisings and revolts and agitations and protests. Whether Hindus or Muslims or Sikhs or Parsis were taking up various reforms during the colonial period. Why? सब लोग इतना क्यों उछल रहे थे? महिलाएं भी और ट्राइबल्स भी, दलित्स भी और बैकवर्ड क्लासेस भी, हिंदू भी, मुसलमान भी. ऐसा क्या हो गया, ऐसी क्या आग लग गई कि सभी सामाजिक वर्ग उछलने लगे? Or what resulted in these numerous, and you must have studied in history several of these movements. Name some. Tell me about some movements. Brahmo Samaj, Arya Samaj, beyond social religious reform movements. बस्तर में क्या हुआ था? ट्राइबल रिवोल्ट हुआ था बस्तर में. और संथल रिबेलियन, किसान सभा मूवमेंट. You are saying one of the reasons. I'm just asking you to give me what other movements took place. ठीक है, national movement of course was there. I'm talking about these other all sorts of protests, agitations, etc. Temple entry movement, trade union movement. No, Chipko was after independence. Chipko, we are talking about the colonial period. Chipko was about 1970s. Savitribai Phule's movement, Jyotirao Phule's movement. Numerous. Kyun? Why? What resulted during the colonial period in these numerous movements? Guys, this is pure spectrum. Now tell me. Modern history में पढ़ चुके हो ये सब आप? क्यों? ठीक है, you have encapsulated it in one word when you say modernization, but what or how did the processes of modernization that were undertaken during colonial period, how did they facilitate these numerous movements? So say you got a new benchmark. So the Western society provided a new benchmark, he's suggesting, for various groups कि भैया women को अगर यूरोप में मिल रही है तो इंडिया में क्यों नहीं मिल रही है. Okay, so international or awareness of international developments also had a bearing. Brother? Very importantly, the modern education system and how? Very good. So, because of the modern education system, a leadership emerged which could guide these new movements, laid down their ideology. Yes or no? Provide leadership and guidance. Printing press से जो new ideas हैं, they could be spread. Campaigns could be launched. Awareness levels could be, awareness could be created on various issues. Very good. और हाँ क्या हुआ उससे ट्रांसपोर्टेशन से ठीक है सो एक नेशनल कॉन्शियसनेस कुड इमर्ज थैंक्स टू दी एक्सटेंसिव ट्रांसपोर्टेशन नेटवर्क से पर्टिकुलरली रेलवेज और बोलते जाओ ठीक है सो मिशनरी एफर्ट्स there was a resistance to them you're suggesting so British policies state policies kind of intervened or destroyed the autonomy of tribes etc है ना या peasants की जो economic condition थी वो worsen हो गई थी due to the economic policies of the British so these new hardships that were created they also contributed to several of these protests, agitations and revolts. है ना? ठीक है. तो लिखो. The colonial period witnessed numerous protests, uprisings, reforms, and social movements by various marginalized sections of the society. What I'll now do is, friends, I'll give you some scholars who have talked about various kinds of movements specifically during the colonial period. So you can use them in your answers. Right now we are developing an overview. Now, for example, Dalit movements we spoke about when we discussed, including colonial period में क्या हो रहा था, when we discussed untouchability and Dalit movement. Women's movement we spoke about, इसी तरह tribals की, peasants की हम पढ़ेंगे आगे जाके. But right now I just want so that you have it at one place. A compendium of scholarly names. तो लिखते जाओ. Women's movements during colonial period किसने बात की है? राधा कुमार, मधु किश्वर, मधु किश्वर, राधा कुमार, मैत्रेयी नहीं चौधरी, दैट्स उमा चक्रवर्ती, नो मैत्रेयी चौधरी, कुमकुम सांगरी. These are scholars who have written extensively on, धन्यवाद भैया, कुमकुम सांगरी, ठीक है. दलित मूवमेंट्स, आनंद, यस, तेल तंबड़े, Gail? No, not Ruben. Not Ruben. Omveth. Gail Omveth. Ghansham? Shah. Good. Tribal movements. L.K. Mahapatra. We'll study when we study, but just note down the names. L.K. L for London, K for Karnataka. Mahapatra. Surjit Sinha. K.S. Singh. K for Karnataka, S for Shimla. Singh. ठीक है. Peasant uprisings. Kathleen Guff. A.R. Desai. Dhanagare. रंजीत गुहा. देखो नाम ज्यादा दे रहा हूं, डोंट गेट इंटिमिडेटेड. द आइडिया इज 4 दूंगा, 2 याद रखोगे, 1 तो लिखोगे. बैकवर्ड क्लास मूवमेंट्स. Gail, Omveth, MSA, very good. Rao, acha, you know him extra, not from the lectures. Okay, but yeah, MSA Rao. Mother, sister, aunt. Rao. ठीक? And it's not an abuse. What it sounds like. Huh? MSA Rao. बहुत सारे हो गए. चलो. Quickly mention. Now write down what are the various causative factors or reasons for various protest movements. Reasons or causative factors for the protests and agitations and movements. As you guys pointed out, the introduction of modern education. So because of that, an educated middle class emerged, which would provide leadership to these organized efforts, right? The ideals of liberty and equality and fraternity. ठीक. The printing press technology. Thanks to which reformers and various groups, they could spread their ideas, raise awareness, etc., campaign. Also, the critique of Indian society. Critique of Indian society. Developed by colonial administrators and missionaries. Basically, they criticize various aspects of Indian society. कि बुरे लोग हो, औरतें जला देते हो, yes or no? या बुरे लोग हो, अनटचेबिलिटी जैसी ग्रोटेस्क प्रैक्टिस करते हो. And that forced us to look within, initiate reforms. ठीक. Also, the economic ruin brought about by the policies of the colonial state. The economic ruination, which was a result of the policies of the colonial state. पेजेंट्स की दिक्कतें बढ़ गई, ट्राइबल्स की बढ़ गई, समाज के विभिन्न वर्गों की दिक्कतें बढ़ गई. The spread of scientific temperament and rationality. Also, friends, during this period, and we have discussed this earlier, some disadvantaged communities, they became prosperous because market-based opportunities were now available. Do you recollect any communities which we spoke of? Is Havas of Kerala or Chamars of UP? Bilkul, है ना? We have discussed it earlier. Basically, these guys enjoyed a monopoly in their respective trades. And now, return was market-based. Market, क्योंकि जजमानी was being replaced by market mechanism. So, उससे wealth आ गई कई disadvantaged communities के लोगों के पास. उससे भी फर्क पड़ा. The British policy of divide and rule. Basically, the British wanted to pit one community against the other. जैसे Pakistan movement was to some extent an outcome of the British policy. Yes or no? ताकि the national movement is weakened or they can, perpetuate their hold over the Indian society and body politic. है ना? So these were the various causative factors. So this is how the colonial rule created a favorable atmosphere for the occurrence of various protests, agitations, movements. ठीक? डेमोक्रेटिक पॉलिटिक्स की बिगिनिंग हुई थी, पीपल्स पार्टिसिपेशन की, है ना? तो इन सब से a conducive climate was created. Now let us quickly mention some of these movements. Of course, what we will be discussing won't be a comprehensive list or an exhaustive list, but it will be only indicative, because there have been so many. And you'll be studying about them at much greater length in your modern history preparation. Okay? But just to give you a sense of what we are talking about. So various women's movements were there, such as पढ़ चुके हम. वो तो डिमांड है, या ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस, मूवमेंट्स, कैंपेन्स, उनके नाम बताओ ना. ब्रह्मो समाज, यस और नो, अगेंस्ट सती, और Savitribai Phule's efforts to promote education, All India Women's Conference demanding political this thing or public life में participation, yes or no? Bharat Stree Mahamandal, Sakhi Sadan, so many. थोड़ी पेजेंट मूवमेंट्स बता दो. वी हैव नॉट स्टडीड, वी विल, बट यू शुड नो फ्रॉम हिस्ट्री. चंपारण या इंडिगो रिबेलियन, रिबेलियन बोलते हैं. चंपारण थिंग, डोंट राइट थिंग. खेड़ा सत्याग्रह, बारदोली सत्याग्रह, नहीं, वी टॉकिंग पेजेंट्री, है ना. वाई मिल, ठीक है. हाँ, अच्छा, वो लाइन में आ जाते हैं. दी किसान सभा मूवमेंट, तिभागा मूवमेंट, ठीक, खूब सारी हैं. ट्राइबल अपराइजिंग्स बता दो कुछ. संथल रिबेलियन, मुंडा रिबेलियन, अहोम अपराइजिंग, भील अपराइजिंग, खूब सारी. कुकी रिबेलियन भी हुआ था. हर ही छोटे बड़े ट्राइब ने रिबेलियन तो किया ही था, ले देखे. Socio-religious reform movements, such as ब्रह्मो समाज, आर्य समाज, प्रार्थना समाज, साधारण ब्रह्मो समाज. देखते हैं हर इंसान ने अपना अपना ब्रह्मो समाज खोल लिया था. ठीक है, एक ब्रह्मो समाज ऑफ इंडिया भी था शायद, है ना. जिनकी नहीं पटती थी वो अपना खोल लेते थे. रामकृष्ण मिशन, आर्य समाज, इफ नॉट ऑलरेडी मेंशन्ड. यंग बंगाल किसकी थी? डेरोजियो, 17-18 साल का लड़का. खूब सारी थी ऐसी. Arya Samajis also began this Gurukul movement, though not too successfully. They tried to revive the Gurukul system of education. है ना? What has been the most impactful, or should I say, visible contribution of the Arya Samaj movement? Yes? Raise your hands and say. Yes, the DAV group of institutions, yeah. Still thriving and growing, kind of a DAV group, like chain of schools and colleges. Dayanand Anglo-Vedic system, है ना. काफी कुछ किया आर्य समाज ने, थोड़ी बहुत गड़बड़े भी करी. We'll speak as we proceed. ठीक, वेरियस एंटी कास्ट मूवमेंट्स, एंटी कास्ट या एंटी अनटचेबिलिटी मूवमेंट्स, जैसे कि महर मूवमेंट लेड बाय अंबेडकर. टेम्पल एंट्री मूवमेंट किसकी? नहीं, सबरीमला नहीं, गांधी, वाइकोम सत्याग्रह वगैरह, दीज वर गांधीयन मूवमेंट्स, नॉट अंबेडकराइट. ठीक है, वाइकोम सत्याग्रह आपने शायद सुना हो, है ना. सत्य शोधक समाज, सत्य शोधक समाज बाय ज्योतिराव फूले. सत्यशोधक समाज literally means truth seekers society. Truth seekers society. Phule wrote a book titled Gulamgiri. Gulamgiri. Some of the lesser known ones I might explain to a in a slightly greater detail. Huh? Gulamgiri literally meaning slavery. This was one of the first systematic critiques of the caste system. Ambedkar acknowledges Phule as his ideological predecessor. Phule also championed women's education and supported Savitribai Phule, his wife's efforts towards the same. Phule also advocated agrarian reforms, a much less known dimension of his contributions. He's primarily seen as an anti-caste crusader, but he also advocated agrarian reforms. So, he wrote detailing the impact of the colonial policies on Indian agriculture. He severely criticized the colonial policies towards Indian agriculture and farmers. For example, he highlighted how the British was, excessively taxing the peasantry. Excuse me. He also suggested very modern kind of radical, for that time, reforms in Indian agriculture. So that time, writing in the 19th century, he advocated that the state should take efforts to enhance agricultural income of the peasantry. अब जाके मोदी जी ने कमिटी बिठाई थी टू डबल एग्रीकल्चरल इनकम फ्यू इयर्स बैक, एंड ही हैड एडवोकेटेड इट इन द 19th century. He of course advocated lowering taxes on the peasantry. He also suggested that the peasantry should be educated. The peasantry should be educated. So that they can adopt modern agricultural techniques. He also advocated building dams, developing irrigation facilities, डैम बिल्डिंग, इरिगेशन सिस्टम डेवलप करना, पेजेंट्री को पढ़ाना, साइंटिफिक अडॉप्शन ऑफ साइंटिफिक मेथड्स इन एनिमल ब्रीडिंग, एनिमल हस्बेंड्री जो बोलते हैं. ठीक है. सो ये है कौन? ज्योतिराव फूले. एक SNDP मूवमेंट थी. हैड वी डिस्कस दिस व्हाइल डिस्कसिंग दलित मूवमेंट? श्री नारायण धर्म परिपालन. श्री नारायण धर्म परिपालन. SNDP योगम was established. I repeat, Sri Narayan Dharma Paripalan. SNDP Yogam was established by Sri Narayan Guru. Sri Narayan Guru. This movement was amongst the Ezhavas. We've mentioned Ezhavas earlier, right? They'd come into some money. So he suggested that Ezhavas should improve their social condition. Ezhavas should improve their social condition through self-help. मतलब कि instead of relying upon the higher castes to improve their lot, they should do so through self-help. He also suggested that Ezhavas should learn Sanskrit. कहता है कहते हैं कि if higher castes do not give you entry in their temples, you establish your own temples. Become priests. Learn Sanskrit. ठीक. Narayan Guru gave the slogan, one caste, one religion, and one God. मतलब सब लोगों की एक जाति, एक धर्म, एक भगवान. And what is that? Humanity, इंसानियत. ठीक है. और various others were there. Theosophical movement you may have heard of. Initiated by, Annie Besant came in the picture later. Started by Theosophical movement. हाँ वही, Colonel Olcott and Madam Blavatsky. Later on, of course, Annie Besant was very closely associated with the movement. Theosophical was not anti-caste, just to clarify, in case. Or why only Hindus? There were movements amongst Muslims, such as the Aligarh movement. Aligarh movement. Deobandi movement, Wahhabi movement, अलीगढ़ मूवमेंट, देवबंदी मूवमेंट, वहाबी मूवमेंट, कई सारी थी. अहमदिया मूवमेंट, सॉरी, हाँ, खिलाफत ऑफ कोर्स दैट वाज टेकन अप बाय द नेशनल लीडरशिप ऑल्सो. सो इन दैट सेंस इट डिडंट रिमेन कन्फाइंड टू मुस्लिम्स, बट या ठीक. सिखों में हुई थी अकाली मूवमेंट. क्यों थी ये? हाँ, टू फ्री दी गुरुद्वाराज ऑफ दी कंट्रोल ऑफ दी करप्ट महंत, ऐसे बोलते हैं, है ना. एंड आफ्टर दैट यू हैड दीज डेमोक्रेटिक टाइप बॉडीज लाइक गुरुद्वारा प्रबंधक कमिटीज दैट वर एस्टैब्लिश्ड एंड हैव बीन रनिंग गुरुद्वाराज सिंस. पारसियों में हुई थी रहनुमाई मजदा यासा सभा, दैट राइट. सो वेरियस कम्युनिटीज में रहनुमाई बुलवा के ही रहोगी बार बार. मजदा यासना सभा. Parsis were in fact one of the most progressive and the earliest communities to take to modernization. We'll talk about Parsis also for a little while because they're a small community. ठीक, चलो. So बहुत सारी हुई. And of course you will refer to many of these in detail in history. तो कैसी लगी ये मूवमेंट्स? बढ़िया रही या नहीं ब्रदर? बढ़िया. What has been their impact on Indian society? इनसे क्या हुआ बताओ ना. खोलो अपने दिमाग की स्पेक्ट्रम और फूटो, बताइए. हाँ. एंड ऑफ कोर्स वॉट एवर वी से ब्रदर, रिफॉर्म्स हुए, जाहिर है. रिफॉर्म मूवमेंट ही तो रिफॉर्म हुए, जाहिर है. बिल्कुल. हाँ. जेंडर इक्वालिटी, got the idea of gender equality got promoted. I'll make you right also. Huh? Definitely they led to a lot of changes in the society. The second part is definitely cannot be taken as it is. He's saying that thanks to these movements we have less conflicts today than earlier. Which is like difficult to entirely endorse. If I may try to paraphrase you, perhaps you are suggesting, correct me if I am wrong, that the intensity of oppression has reduced. It has increased oppression. We are a relatively more egalitarian society than earlier, thanks to these movements. So they have led to social progress. Simply, brother. Position of women and tribals and peasants, etc. has improved. Very good. Rise of nationalism and communalism, which is okay. So several laws have been introduced, partly influenced by these uprisings and movements. For example, laws prohibiting purchase of tribal land by non-tribals in several parts of the country. The political influence of marginalized social groups like Dalits, like women, like backward classes, like tribals increased. Bitya? Definitely education levels increased. British policies also factored in these movements. Bilkul. As a result of these movements, you're suggesting? Yes, good, correct. And give me examples. He's suggesting new political parties emerged. Akali Dal came out of the Akali movement. The Communist Party came out of the labor movement. Prohibition of untouchability, various such legal constitutional measures. Thank you, Likho. What has been the impact of these various protests, agitations and movements? As follows. Consequences, impact on the society. Now when I say these movements, I mean several of them, because we are talking about all kinds of movements, right? So all of those movements won't have the same kind of impacts. So we are definitely talking about some. That's understood. I won't every time say some of these movements. So many of these movements contributed to the spread of modern education. Particularly for the marginalized sections, विमेन के लिए, लोअर कास्ट के लिए, ट्राइबल्स के लिए, है ना. These movements also highlighted social discrimination, structured inequalities, regressive social practices, and social evils like sati, ill treatment of women, etc. ठीक. These movements contributed towards modernization of Indian society. As they promoted ideals of liberty, equality, promoted rationalism, individualism. ये सारे मॉडर्न सोसाइटी के डायमेंशंस हैं या नहीं है? Many of the movements challenged the then prevailing social inequalities, questioned the legitimacy of various forms of oppression. ठीक. Some of these movements also tried to address the colonial critique of Indian society and culture. They also attempted to address the colonial and missionary critique of Indian society. How did they respond? Missionaries कहते थे तुम लोग गंदे हो, औरतें जला देते हो, जल्दी ब्याह देते हो, ये सब करते हो. तो हम क्या कहा रिफॉर्मर्स ने? Two things. One, they initiated reforms within the society to get rid of these practices. Secondly, they argued that these are not a part of, or this is not what our scriptures prescribe. Yes or no? So they tried to defend Hindu culture and Hinduism, arguing that these are not an integral part. Untouchability is not. कईयों ने बोला. Sati is not sanctioned by scriptures. This was the overall tone and tenor of several of these reformers. Yes or no? These movements led to an improvement in the social conditions of several marginalized groups. वही सारे बेसिकली अपर कास्ट मैन को छोड़ के सारे. Women, tribals, peasants, the lower castes. These movements also contributed to nationalism. Particularly, whose thoughts or writings have Ambedkar? Nahi. Even more than a Tilak or a Gandhi. I mean, Gandhi, of course, he's like a very big shadow. Swami Vivekanand. And to a lesser extent, Saraswati. Basically, they defended Indian culture and civilization. They glorified, not just defended, they glorified. They said we were awesome actually. Okay, these are relatively later corruptions which have crept into the Indian society and body politic. Okay, vahi Sativati. So they glorified Hindu culture and civilization. ठीक? These movements also, again, some of them were able to exert sufficient pressure on the colonial state, forcing it to bring about progressive What progressive legislations were passed? Abolition of sati, slavery, regulating the age of marriage, permitting widow remarriage, etc. ठीक है, ह्यूमन सैक्रिफाइस को प्रोहिबिशन, इसे उन्होंने बहुत सारी चीजें करी. और these movements also led to, or these movements expressed, some of these movements of course, dissent against colonial policies. Basically they told the British that Indian peasantry or tribals, they won't take their economic exploitation lying down. Yes or no? इनसे ब्रिटिश को ये मैसेज गया कि they can't just go about, as business as usual when they are intruding into the forests or whatever, ruining the peasantry. So these rebellions, etc., told that. These movements also later on led to institutionalizing social change. Institutionalizing social change in the sense, friends, their agenda of many of these movements was later on taken up and incorporated in the constitutional and legal framework. After independence, the agenda of many of these movements was made a part of the constitutional and legal framework. So institutionalize हो गई. For example, against the caste system, you had movements which wanted the abolition of untouchability made into the constitution. Women's groups were fighting for gender equality provided for in the constitution and laws. Peasantry wanted that the exploitative zamindari system be done away with. After independence, it was abolished. Tribals wanted that their autonomy or control over lands be preserved. Later on, it was also incorporated in the constitutional and legal framework. Yes or no? Some of these movements also contributed to Bharlo Sase, contributed to Sanskritization. Sanskritization. For example, friends, many of the reformers, Arya Samaj, Brahmo Samaj type people, MNE, Ram Mohan Roy, Ram Mohan Roy type people, what they did, they translated scriptures into vernacular languages. And through printing press, they spread their message or their word far and wide. But now masses could access scriptural knowledge. Yes or no? Sanskritic texts were translated into vernacular languages and spread. दूसरी तरफ आप देखोगे certain movements very directly encouraged Sanskritization. For example, the SNDP Yoga movement. Yes or no? Which we just talked about. क्या कहती थी? संस्कृत सीखो, temples establish करो, several such things. या ताना भगत मूवमेंट, ट्राइबल्स में हुई थी संस्कृताइजिंग मूवमेंट, लिकर छोड़ दो, इस टाइप की ताना भगत. However, अब थोड़ी बुराई करेंगे इन मूवमेंटों की. पहली बात, मोस्ट ऑफ दीज मूवमेंट्स वर ज्योग्राफिकली लोकलाइज्ड. अब रंपा रिबेलियन सिर्फ रंपास में हो रहा है, संथल को कोई उससे मतलब नहीं है ना. अलग अलग जगह में इनका इन्फ्लुएंस लिमिटेड था. दूसरी बात, इनका जो सोशल बेस था फॉर मेनी ऑफ दीज मूवमेंट्स वाज लिमिटेड. द सोशल बेस वाज लिमिटेड. अब जैसे कि ये जो आर्य समाज, ब्रह्मो समाज टाइप मूवमेंट्स थी, देयर सोशल बेस वाज कन्फाइंड टू सिटी बेस्ड, मिडिल क्लास, अपर कास्ट, पढ़े लिखे पीपल, राइट. तीसरी बात, some of these movements contributed to communalism. For example, Arya Samajis. They launched campaigns for cow protection. They were the original Gau Rakshaks. They also launched the Shuddhi movement. Shuddhi movement was basically to convert back to Hinduism those who had converted to another faith. The original Ghar Vapsi. And such campaigns led to communal tensions and clashes. है ना. सेक्युलरिज्म के खातिर Which Muslim movement led to, contributed towards communalism? Not Deobandi. See, Deobandi movement basically emphasized on teaching, spreading Islamic teachings to Indian Muslims. Right? कहाँ पे है देवबंदी? सहारनपुर, उत्तर प्रदेश में. You have this Dar ul Ulum Deoband, है ना? That is the headquarters of the Deobandi movement. It is one of the largest Islamic seminaries in India. It aimed at preaching Islamic teachings, but it was very closely aligned with the national movement. It was whole hog supportive of the Congress party. It was the Aligarh movement. Aligarh movement sought to promote modern education and Islamic teachings, but also modern education amongst Indian Muslims. And the Aligarh movement, or the Aligarh University, became the hub of the Pakistan movement. जिन्ना वगैरह सब जो भी लीडरशिप थी ना पाकिस्तान मूवमेंट की, दे वर प्रोडक्ट्स ऑफ द अलीगढ़ मूवमेंट. ठीक. Some of these movements, they also क्या कहते हैं, contributed to weakening national unity. Even threatening national integration. For example, Periyar, he launched a movement for Dravid Nadu, or a separate Dravid homeland. Periyar demanded a Dravid Nadu, basically a separate federation. It was a secessionist movement, clearly. They wanted to secede from the Indian Union. Jinnah's Pakistan movement, है ना? So to that extent, some of these movements played into the hands of the British, or they brought into the British policy of divide and rule, weakening national unity or the anti-colonial struggle. तो ये है about various protests and agitations and reforms during the colonial period. The reforms, of course, friends, were, क्या नाम है, many reforms were, the colonial state also played an important role in institutionalizing several reforms, चाहे सती abolition, blah blah, bye. ठीक. बहुत सारे लॉज पास किए उन्होंने. जय श्री राम. चलो, धन्यवाद.